Good afternoon, everyone. I think we're ready to get started right now. Can everyone see the slides? My name is Larissa DeLuna, and I'm with the American Heart Association's Southwest affiliate, and we're happy to welcome you to our Mission Lifeline EMS Recognition webinar. Just to let you know, we do have a whole suite of programs offered by the American Heart Association to help you improve your quality of care within your facility. You can find those at heart.org/quality. Just to go over a few housekeeping items for today, all lines have been placed on mute to cut down on background noise. If you have a question throughout the webinar, please unmute your line with *6. Also, our webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our website after the call within 1 week. We will send out an email with any handouts, our slides, and also the website for where this will be posted by the end of this week. So to go ahead and get started, I just want to introduce our speaker, Ben Leonard. Ben began his career in rural frontier EMS in 1996 as a volunteer EMT in western Nebraska. He received his paramedic certification in 2000 and has been working in the field of fire and EMS. He has served as a paramedic in the private sector, hospital-based, and fire-based EMS services, as well as a flight paramedic in Nebraska, Wyoming, and South Dakota. He joined the American Heart Association in 2012 as the EMS director for Mission Lifeline, Wyoming. He and his wife, Alicia, along with their 2 sons, live in Casper, Wyoming. So without any further ado, Ben, would you like to go ahead and get started for today?
Yes, thank you, Larissa. I appreciate it, and appreciate everybody's patience on getting a couple minutes late start here, and we'll get going as we on today. And so hopefully what today is, for those of you that have gone through the EMS recognition process from last year, a lot of this hopefully will be a review. We did want to take a little bit of time to go over some of the updates that are coming in for the 2015 application period, and we'll do kind of a high-level overview of that. We also have a guest panelist on the call today, Mick Gunderson. We'll get him introduced here in just a second. But what we wanted to do, if you remember last year when we did this, the entire EMS recognition webinar was actually happened with one presentation. We focused really on the first part of what the measures were, what the volume requirements were, along with some of those intricate details about the program. And then we broke it off in the same webinar and actually went through the application period or process. And what we wanted to do with this go-around, since we're doing this a little bit earlier in the year, we wanted to focus today's call about the measures, about the volume requirements, and like I said, do a little bit of a high-level overview of the 2015 application processes, and then have another webinar later on in the year, probably closer to December, right before the application process launches, so that'll be a little fresher in your mind. So what we're hoping for today, along with the presentation, is to really kind of instill a little bit of roundtable discussion. I know a lot of the people on the call today have gone through this process. We're absolutely welcome and encourage idea sharing, model sharing if you're using the same types of vendors for your EPCRs. So if you have any success stories, we'd love to hear about them today. So as I said, today what our objectives are, we'd like to review the EMS recognition measures, the 3 measures that we've talked about before. As I said, we like to discuss some collection strategies in regards to the data, and we've got some great slides on that. Like I said, provide a brief update of the 2014 period, or the calendar year 2014 changes for the application 2015 process. And then once again, open it up for some questions and answers. Larissa, thanks. That was a great introduction. My name is Ben Leonard, Mission Lifeline Director. I live out of Casper, Wyoming. And we have Mick Gunderson on the phone as well. He's Director of Clinical Systems. He's out of Lakeland, Florida. Mick was recently promoted to this position, and we invited him here to be on the call today to help with some of those questions and just if more or less to keep me in line if needed. So we'd like to thank Mick for being here on his busy calendar. So we'll get started here. As we all know, the Mission Lifeline program is a American Heart Association program that is designed to minimize the time of symptom onset or injury to when that injured vessel can be reperfused either through PCI or through lytics. This is a focus on a system-based approach, which obviously all participants at the table have such an integral part in providing that high level of patient care. American Heart Association started a few years ago awarding the hospitals as a performance-based recognition. And as most of you know, the EMS component of recognition is still in its infancy. And as we go out today, we'll go over some of the updates for this go-around, but we really wanted to thank every one of you that participated with the constructive criticism and constructive feedback on this entire program. We are looking at every component of that as much as we can and implementing where we can as well. And as this is in its infancy, we do realize that we want to make sure it's all inclusive and we make this the best program available. And so we'll be able to get everybody that's a part of that system recognized where they deserve to be. So as we go through these measures, I think most of you will be happy to see that none of these measures have changed. As we look at these and as a review, everybody that's going to be applying for this, we've got some slides following this that kind of gets a little bit more in detail. Everybody that's applying for EMS recognition needs to report on this first measure. The percentage of patients with non-traumatic chest pain 35 years or older, treated, transported by EMS, who get a pre-hospital 12 lead. Depending on if you transport to a STEMI receiving facility or a facility that's capable of doing PCI, you will report on measures 1 and then 2, which is the percentage of patients that have a STEMI as identified by a pre-hospital, and the first medical contact to device time is 90 minutes or less. Now, if your transport destination is to a non-PCI facility, you will report on measure 1 and then measure 3. The third measure is the percentage of STEMI patients identified by EMS, once again, arrive to the referring facility, and they have a fibrinolytic therapy administration in 30 minutes or less, or door-to-needle time of 30 minutes or less. Now, as we go through these next few slides, we'll actually go a little bit deeper into each one of these measures. So this measure 1, collecting the data. If we go through, for me personally, looking at numerators and denominators gave me horrible nightmares of algebra in high school. However, in the data world, this is really what we're looking for. We're looking at the percentages, and that's defined by the numerator and denominator. So looking at your denominator, it's your pool of patients. That first number that we want to look at, and if you're looking at tracking your data, when you do your search or start to run your report, you want to look at these first few metrics. The patients 35 years or older, non-traumatic with a chief complaint of chest pain. And when you run your search or you do your data mining, that's that patient population that you want to look at first. Now, of that group or of that denominator, you want to look at those that had a 12-lead EKG done by pre-hospital personnel. That will give you your numerator. Numerator goes on top, denominator goes on the bottom. That gives you your percentage. Now, between those two numbers, it has to equal 75% or greater before it will be counted towards recognition. And as we go through, if you do a lot of 12 leads, and you have a lot of patients, it's not that difficult to hit the 75%, or at least the patient volume. And as we go through, and speaking of volume, you don't see that there's a specific volume related to this first measure. And that's because of the fact that if you are achieving the volumes on the other two measures, this one will be included as well. The next measure, the first medical contact to device activation in 90 minutes or less. Once again, this is the measure that you would be reporting on if you were solely transporting to a PCI-capable facility. Now, we have a couple tools that were available last year that were really helpful, at least with a few of the services that I looked at and worked with to tracking these STEMIs. Now, as you can see, we're going to need to work with our hospital counterparts on getting their times as well if we as EMS professionals can actually take a list of STEMIs that were identified by your crews and say, hey, can you give me basically the door-to-balloon times that you had for patients, however you had the blinded patient identifier set up. So if you have a list of 10 patients, 10 STEMIs that were identified pre-hospital, take those to the hospital that you transported to and say, can I have your door-to-balloon times? The interesting thing about this, Mission Lifeline hospital awards are also looking at the patients that had EMS component to their treatment. They're no longer just doing door-to-balloon for those patients. The hospitals need that first medical contact time, which they'll probably in turn ask for you. So they're looking at first medical contact device, and you guys are looking for first medical contact device. So if you can track the number of STEMIs that were identified in the field and get that list to your hospital counterparts, they'll probably ask you for the time that when you first had contact with them, so they can track that metric as well. But anyway, as the slide states, number of patients 18 years or older, STEMI noted on pre-hospital ECG, transported to a STEMI receiving facility, and had primary PCI performed. Those are the patients that we want to track. Of those patients, were their total time, first medical contact to device time, 90 minutes or less. Now, if we look at some of the, we as EMS professionals know that there are a lot of things that we can control in our world. Unfortunately, there's a few things that we can't. When we look at reporting the outliers and applying the exclusions, these exclusions are really defined by system-based exclusions. So if there is a non-system delay, we track those, and that number is actually taken out of your denominator. So if it goes past 90 minutes, that patient is not going to be counted in your equation. So if you look at some of these outlying volumes or exclusions that count that are non-system based. So the first one, delaying caused by patient or family providing consent for treatment and or transport. The next one, delay because they arrested and they had a need for intubation. There's a delay in access in the femoral artery or crossing the lesion. Now, if you notice, a lot of these are related to the hospital. Now, but these are specifically from the hospital's exclusion list for action registry, so we apply them to here. Once again, kind of instilling that concept of working with your hospitals, and if you kind of have that red flag on alert, so if they give you back a time that's beyond the 90 minutes or less, we would like you guys to ask why. Why did that delay occur? We had first medical contact to door time, if you will, in 30 minutes. What took the 60-plus minutes or the 60-plus minutes on your facility side? And that, in the way we do that, has to be somewhat constructive. It has to be roundtable type discussions. So, obviously you don't want to have people go up on the defensive and close down on you. So look for, and this is a good way to do it. You have the terminology that they're looking at. You have these exclusion criteria, and start there. Start that dialogue there with your hospital counterparts, and see if you can't get it nailed down as to why that delay. But okay, so sorry about that. I kind of hit my mouse button a little too much. So the third measure that we're looking at is for those EMS agencies that are transporting to a non-PCI facility to where you're looking at the fibrinolytic administration with 30 minutes or less. Once again, our denominator, number of patients 18 years older, with a STEMI that's been noted on pre-hospital ECG. We transport these folks to the STEMI referring facility, and they had fibrinolytics administered. When we're looking at the numerator, we want to look to make sure that these patients had lytics given to them in 30 minutes or less after they hit the door. Looking at the outliers and applying the exclusions, once again, our non-system delays or our exclusion is, number one, getting a consent signed by the patient or family for treatment or transport, and same with the other measure of the patient actually experiencing cardiac arrest and having the need for intubation. When we look through the first two measures, obviously the first measure is a major component for EMS. We control, who gets 12 lead, how we can do that. The second measure, first medical contact to device time, we have an influence on that first medical contact. And at first looking at that third measure, how can we actually impact the fibrinolytic administration, especially when we're just looking at a door-to-needle time? Well, there is actually, as you can see here in that second bullet point, some of the references that actually EMS has a major impact on how quickly that lytic can be administered. And if you guys, let's see, if you want to look at any of these any further, by all means, get a hold of one of us, AHA staffers, get a hold of your QSI field contact person, and we can get these to you. But where EMS is concerned, getting that 12 lead done, getting that notification going for those referring facilities, if medical direction signs off on it, come together and figure out a pre-hospital fibrinolytic checklist. If you can get that done, you have the working relationship with your hospital counterparts. If you can show up with a 12 lead that's shown an active STEMI, you have a fibrinolytic checklist completed, that's going to speed up that process so much. If you look here at the December 2013 Action Registry Get With Guideline data, only 44% of the patients that receive fibrinolytic do so in 30 minutes or less. Now, this is obviously, especially in Wyoming, this is a huge component for us. The entire state of Wyoming has 2 PCI facilities that are able to give PCI treatments 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We do have 2 other facilities that can provide PCI. However, they do not have 24/7 coverage. So looking at these numbers, lytic administration is extremely important in the rural states. Okay, so when we're looking at exclusions, we've talked a little bit about it today. Some tips that we have with doing this, a patient can be excluded a single time. So if you have multiple non-system delays on one patient, it still only counts once for one of the criteria. And I think the rest of these are pretty well explanatory. The exclusion regarding delays in consent and the need for CPR can be used when these delays occur with EMS or when they occur after the arrival at a destination center. In the application, the achievement will be calculated with the excluded patients applied to the original denominator. So as I said before, if you have an exclusion, this patient will actually be taken away from your denominator, thus increasing your percentage for the recognition process. Okay, so when we're looking at some of the examples of the tools that are available, this one is actually from last year, and it's modifiable. You can get it from the website. That's in an Excel spreadsheet form. And what we'd like to do, or what's helped, and I've coached some of the EMS agencies that I've been working with, is this is where you want to start tracking these patients, or go back and track these patients that you've actually identified as having a STEMI on your pre-hospital ECGs. You give this list to your hospital counterparts. They, in turn, give you their door-to-balloon times for that patient. You apply it to your response times, come up with a first medical contact to device measure, and then make sure, looking at your total time, and it's 90 minutes or less, it counts as a check mark. So I'd like to kind of lead in a little bit here and see if my hyperlink works. And give me just a second. Okay, so this is, if everybody can see this other sheet here, I've actually added 2 columns onto this sheet. If you can see it, in the far left column, we have, in the red lettering, a yes-no column of a tiered response system. And if you hit yes, or if you select yes, what the thought is to put who that responding agency is, whether it be fire department, it's flight service, etc., BLS, ambulance service. But basically, if we can start tracking these numbers and these agencies, We are actually working on a tiered or a partnership with other agencies to get them recognized as well. Once again, emphasizing the idea of a system. And one of the best, I think, pieces of feedback we received after the last year's was how do we include the other people that work pre-hospital, whether it be a flight service that flies out to the rural areas and helps with transport, whether it be a fire department that responds that's ALS equipped or even BLS equipped. They administer aspirin. They can acquire 12-lead. How can we recognize these people as well? And the American Heart Association and the EMS recognition committee team have actually come up with the idea to do a joint application process. Okay. This next slide actually kind of has a decision tree, and pictures and colors really helps out a lot for me anyway. So when we go through the tiered application or the joint application, if we start up here at the purple, to apply, obviously your agency must be an ambulance service, both medical response agency or both. If going over to the left here to the blue provides either 12 leads or transport, you want to check to see if the agency that you're working with is going to apply for the EMS recognition. And if they are, contact them to enter into the joint application process. If we look in the center column of the orange, the EMS agency provides both 12 lead and a transport. Once again, this is where that worksheet is. If you're going to be working with other agencies, whether it be for example, an engine company 33. If that's your crew that you respond with, that's who's helping you with these STEMIs. Make sure that we get those folks tracked at least, and once we go through the application period process, we'll show you how to do that application with the joint agency. So, pretty exciting news. I thought it was fantastic, especially as like I said before. If we're really looking at the system does not start just with EMS, and I think we all know that. As a paramedic, my job was made a lot easier with the crew that I had working with me. So getting those folks recognized, I think, is key, and I think I was really happy to see this come out this year. So, and then finally on the right column, if we look at the green, if they provide support to the agency that does not do 12-lead or transport, go ahead and call and get a hold of that agency, see if there's a way that we can get you included as well. Now, I think with the way this is going, I think it's fantastic because we're still getting everybody to the table. We're still getting as many people included as possible, but I think there's a fine line that we have to make sure that the application and the process and the recognition is still worthwhile and it's still meaningful. And I think this is a great way to get it done. So I will actually pause right there. Those are the measures that we're going over. And it says going to see if there's any questions that have come up. We'll try to get those answered. You can either put them in the chat, I think, and then Larissa, you can help me out with that. Or if anybody else has any questions, just go ahead and come off mute.
Yes, so *6 to unmute your line, and you also have the functionality to ask questions via GoToMeeting. I do have one question that's come in through GoToMeeting, Ben, if we want to address it. What if there's more than one fire department involved in this new tiered recognition process?
That's a great question. So in the way that I understand it, and this is where we'll thankfully have Mick and on the line, but more or less for those STEMIs that you're responding with, say if you're an EMS agency and you respond with potentially 2 or 3 other fire departments, right now the best thing to do is just to track those specific STEMI patients that you've encountered and make sure you know which fire department was with you on that call, if that makes sense. The application process, getting that, and how do we track that and how do we apply for that will come out in that future webinar. But to give a quick answer, there is a possibility that there will be more than one award handed out. So if it's ambulance service ABC that works with fire department XYZ on, this handful of calls, and then you have ambulance service ABC again with fire department LMN on this call, there's potential for 2 different awards to be handed out with that. And Mick, by all means, if you're on and available, if I'm off base on that, please correct me, but that was my understanding.
No, you're right on target, Ben. So imagine, if you have a scenario where you respond with a couple fire departments, you'll need to meet the volume requirements for each one of those combinations. So let's suppose you're an ambulance service and you respond with 3 different fire departments, and those fire departments do 12 leads, and you provide the transport. And you might do 12 leads also, but let's suppose you went on 30 calls and you went 10 calls with each one of the 3 fire departments. One application would have your ambulance service along with fire department A. That would be one application, and that application would be reviewed in context of just those 10 calls that you guys worked on together. It would be a different application for the 10 calls you ran with fire department B, and then again a separate application for the calls you ran with fire department C. Now that is for the far left scenario on that diagram, where it's a joint application process where the first responder and the ambulance service are working together to get the 12 lead and the transport done. Now the difference is with the center yellow column, let's suppose that the fire departments you work with don't do 12 leads, obviously, and you're the ambulance agency, so they're not doing transport. In those cases, you would just take all 30 of your calls, put them all together, and you would name all of the different fire departments that support your efforts out in the field, and that would be one application, but it would have your ambulance service named along with all of your fire department partners that you named on your application. So hopefully that helps clarify rather than confuse the issue.
I think that's great. Thanks, Mick.
One other point of clarification that I remember the first time I looked at this, what I was a little bit thrown by, is the time of first medical contact. And there is a nuance to that definition that I'd like to point out, and that is the time for the first agency, whether it's first response or ambulance, that was 12 lead capable, made contact with the patient. So going back to the scenario where the first responders do not do 12 leads, their arrival time is not when the clock starts, or the 90 minutes or the 30 minutes, respectively. It would be when the first 12 lead capable EMS provider agency, transport or not transport, makes contact with the patient.
Great. I know there's been a lot of questions come up about first medical contact and how do we actually stamp that, and having that cleared up is perfect. Thank you, Mick.
One other nuance to that I've also gotten some questions on is if the only time you have available in your data system is arrival at scene, that would have to suffice. But our preference is for your actual time of, hands-on contact with the patient. So when eyes were on the patient is the time we would really prefer to use. But we also recognize that some EMS data collection systems may not yet have patient contact time. And certainly that will make it easier for you because that doesn't shave those couple minutes from scene arrival to patient contact time off of your clock. So it would be to your advantage to use the actual patient contact rather than scene arrival time. But if scene arrival time is all you have, that's fine.
All right. Perfect. Thanks, Mick. Any other questions, Larissa?
No, that was it. But just as a reminder, everyone, we will be sending out the copies of the slides by the end of the week for this webinar too. So just to let y'all know that. And no other questions in the GoToMeeting queue, Ben?
Okay. Well, we'll continue on. We'll now take a look at the volume requirements, the other component that we're looking at. We've talked about the measures, now we'll look at the volumes. We'll start with the bronze, and really there's very little change with the bronze. Once again, we're looking at 75% compliance for each of the required measures. So once again, depending on your transport destination, you'll either report on measure 1, which is the number of patients that got a 12 lead that had non-traumatic chest pain, 35 years or older. That has to be 75%. Depending on your transport destination, will dictate whether or not you report on measure 2 or 3 or potentially both if you regularly transport to both. But we're looking at first medical contact to device time or door to needle time, and that percentage has to be at 75% in order to be eligible. Looking at the volume, 2 patients per reporting quarter with at least 4 STEMI patients in the 2014 calendar year. So that has not changed at all. What has changed was when we go to the silver level. Instead of, if you remember, with the last process, it was basically all reporting quarters had to be at 75% for each measure. What we've done is we've taken and we've looked at the volume of being aggregated, or the scores being aggregated for the entire year. Now, the example that I had kind of worked out in my head. Last year, if we were going through and we were doing the application process, quarter 1, let's say we had 1 STEMI patient. Quarter 2, let's say we had 5 STEMI patients. Quarter 3, we had 5, and then quarter 4, we had 6. Gave us a total of 17 for the year, which obviously meets our volume requirement of 8. But let's say, for example, quarter number 1, we had a system delay with that single STEMI. That put our first medical contact to device time at 97 minutes. With that single system delay, that took you out of eligibility for silver recognition. And so, obviously, that we got to looking at that. The way I understand the hospital measures, the scores are actually aggregated for the entire year. So what we've done is on the EMS side of things is we've aggregated it. So instead of looking at our total patients of our example here, 17 patients, in order to meet silver, 12 of those patients have to be 75% over for this level to be achieved. Instead of, you have to have all patients in quarter 1 and so on and so forth. So I hope that makes sense. We do have tools, handouts, one-pagers that are going to be coming out that will help support this. But with this concept, I'll actually open the floor up again. First of all, I'll throw it to Mick to make sure I'm on target with my explanation, and then we'll go with any questions on the aggregate scoring for silver.
Yeah, Ben, just one thing I'd like to point out with the bronze recognition is, it says you have to have 2 cases in each reporting quarter. But let's suppose you only have 1 quarter that meets criteria. That's fine, because bronze can be awarded for a single quarter of performance that meets specifications. So if you fell short the other 3 quarters, that's still okay. You can apply and be recognized if you have just 1 quarter. So there's only 1 quarter of reporting data that meets the volume requirement, and in that quarter, you have 75% meeting targets. You're good to go.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks for bringing that out, Mick. And to emphasize that, so I think we had actually a few of our agencies that withheld the application process, say they got a late start and they were only actually able to do, quarter 4 of last year. We actually encourage that. EMS agencies are doing fantastic work, and I think part of this recognition program is making sure that's known. So by all means, apply, even if you have the 1 quarter. So, and the other side of that too, the way with one of the 2015 changes, if you will, if you achieved the silver last year and volumes just weren't there this year or something, you can actually go back down to a bronze level. You don't have to maintain a silver or gold. So I think that's one of the other fantastic points of this is that where EMS agency is actually able to go back to bronze if they're not going to meet silver again this year. So.
Yeah, and a lot of these changes that Ben has been citing is largely in response to comments we got back in feedback, and we're trying to be as accommodating as possible for the lower volume systems and rural providers. We don't want them to be excluded in any way. We recognize the limitations of case numbers for both hospitals and EMS providers. So we're trying to make this as inclusive as possible, and so that's why you're seeing some of these changes to allow a little bit more flexibility on these volume requirements.
Exactly. All right, Larissa, do we have any questions pop up in the go-to chat box for aggregate?
No, we don't have anything.
Okay. Excellent. And so just to reemphasize, as Larissa said, these slides will be available. Contact emails for the regional QSI directors are actually going to be at the end of this slide, and as well as mine. And feel free, if any questions come up, please reach out to us, and we'll address them as they come in.
We actually one question pop up. Sorry,
okay.
Ben. Will there be a way for EMS air transport to reach out to each receiving hospital to request that they use the joint application process? And will the EMS air transport need to be physically at the receiving hospital when they submit the data?
Okay, so the question is to make sure I have it understand. Air ambulance's physical presence there submitting the data, and are they able to reach out to the hospitals to encourage application? Is that kind of how?
Correct. To encourage the joint use of the application, yes.
Yeah. So I think as air agencies, we absolutely recommend reaching out and talking with these facilities. Now, in terms of interfacility transports, if this is kind of where the question is stemming from, we haven't been able to really address those yet. We're still talking about air transport with like the scene responses, and by all means, we truly encourage the air EMS agencies to work with and communicate their EMS agency counterparts to see about applying, and that application process and that application start is actually going to be at EMS agency level, and so hopefully that answers the question. And if it doesn't, I actually invite the question asker to come off mute if they can, or shoot me an email and we can work on it offline. And Nick, by all means, if you have more to add to that, please jump in.
Yeah, so the way I would maybe consider that, or just express it a different way, may help, is we don't have a process for interfacility transports right now. That is something on our radar that we're going to be looking at for next year, but for now we don't. But as far as air ambulance service is concerned, we make no discrimination or differentiation, if you will, between ground ambulance, air ambulance, marine ambulance, snowmobile ambulance, whatever it is that gets the job done, meeting the transport need in a timely fashion to meet our targets is fair game.
Absolutely. Cool. Thank you for the question, by the way.
Yes. Any other questions? Feel free to use the GoToMeeting window to type in your question, or you can come off mute with *6.
Okay. I think we'll continue on. Okay, so with the gold level, this 2015 calendar or 2015 application process. This will be the first go around for our Gold Award winners. So if you were Silver last year, you're eligible for Gold this year as long as you obviously meet the requirements for Silver again. 8 patients in the year for 2014, and they must have achieved the Silver Award in 2014 as well. So just a reminder, Gold is two consecutive Silver recognition levels. And then obviously on your second Silver, you'll be awarded Gold. Okay, and I think, with this slide, this really kind of helps explain it helps with what Mick was talking about earlier in terms of the application. And really when we look at the application and the process, I think Mick gave a great overview of what it's going to be like, and we'll be able to dive deeper into that individual versus team versus joint application process at our part 2 of this webinar. So we'll kind of save that for just a little bit later. But our timeline that we're looking at here, obviously, if you look over on the left, we're looking at now. We want to increase the understanding and the criteria and the volume requirements. Obviously, some big changes with that volume requirement. Utilize, just like what the question was, follow-up opportunities for these hospitals, and as the point was made, great point for the EMS agencies and the air transport agencies to connect and work together with that. On the AHA side of things, we're going to be looking at finalization of the application, some of the supplemental tools, get those uploaded to the website as quickly as possible. And we also ask you as providers to maintain contact with the local QSI directors, make sure they're on. If you have any questions, reach out to them, and we'll get those questions answered as quickly as possible. As we get a little bit later into the year, November, December, we're looking at the data organization, and we ask you guys to really kind of start with finalizing the collection of your EMS data. January 1, we're looking at the application period will open, and it'll last until February 28th, so that's similar to the timeline that we had this last year. April 2015, we will go through the announcing of the recognition award winners at that time. So we'll be looking at, our second webinar for this sometime, I would say, mid to early December, and we'll be able to dive deeper and spend an entire hour going over the actual application period or application process. I don't know why I'm stuck with application period, but it is stuck in my head there for some reason. So as Mick pointed out, a lot of our changes and a lot of our amendments to this process have been kind of instigated by the feedback that we received from the field. And one of the greatest questions I think we had was this one, this box here: why are we held accountable for the PCI time? We as being EMS have no control over patient care once the patient is at the hospital. And with that perspective, you might need to take a step out and take a look at the entire picture and what actually Mission Lifeline is about. With that kind of statement, there's really a compartmentalization of that continuum of care with this thought process. And the way Mission Lifeline works is, we bring those compartments, if you will, together and work on ways and strategies and education and protocols to where people do have a say for that. We are accountable as EMS agencies. We can be held accountable for that PCI time. For an example, the quicker that we as EMS agencies provide notification to the hospital that we're coming in with a STEMI, that's a huge component of PCI time. That gives the team more time to get to the tape or get to the hospital to get prepped. If it's after hours and they're on call, it gives them time to get there. That's a massive component to it, and that's just one. So, but really, when we look at Mission Lifeline as a whole, it's dispatch, our dispatch educator. And we can even put a bullet point above this. And how well is our public informed on the signs and symptoms of heart attack? Well, do they know to call 911 right away, or Do we need to, get some public awareness messages out there to where we can deliver that? Know the signs, call 911, whatever catchphrase, key term you want to use. But I think actually the system starts with our public education and our outreach and our preventative measures. Then it goes to dispatch. Are they dispatch educated? Are they protocol-based if they can? They send in the right unit. First responders, EMS, ground and air, interfacility. And as Mick pointed out, we've got that on our radar for next year. We're looking at the STEMI receiving facilities as well as the referring facilities. All of those have such a huge component and are so accountable with this continuum of care. And that's really what Mission Lifeline is. It's getting everybody to the table and it's getting everybody working together. It's not, the compartmentalization. As soon as I stop seeing the patient, I have nothing to do with it, and I'm not a part of that care any longer. And that's really what we're trying to combat, I think, is that mentality. And but we've taken the constructive stuff. We're doing our best to get it applied to where this program is actually beneficial and it recognizes everybody that needs to be recognized.
And one thing I would add to that, Ben, is the hospitals are also held accountable for the first medical contact to device interval. So, it goes both ways. And This is all systems of care. So the EMS recognition looks at first medical contact to device and the field-specific components with getting those screening 12 leads done on all those patients 35 years and older with non-traumatic chest pain, and the first medical contact to device time. The hospitals are held accountable for first medical contact to device time and their variables that they're responsible for. So both sides of the equation are held accountable for that system metric of first medical contact to device time. It's important to understand that.
Absolutely. As we talked about a little bit here, how EMS multidisciplinary team meetings, I think, are key in its roundtable. We leave our titles at the door, and however the regional area wants to meet, whether it's monthly, quarterly, non-punitive, collaborative, supportive, feedback to each other. Some ideas, and we're seeing some systems do this. They do a mock STEMI drill. What's better than, doing a mock STEMI and getting everybody ready to go? Simulation is really one of the key components of a lot of the education that's coming out. And utilizing simulation in a mock STEMI type drill is fantastic. There's just tons of things that we can do. One of the other questions had trouble getting the needed data from the hospital. In understanding, if the system build is relatively new, that can obviously happen. We recently presented just in our state on feedback loops and the process, and one of the questions that continues to pop up is sharing data in that sense. Is there a HIPAA violation? And really, going to the HIPAA website and understanding HIPAA. As long as you're in a part of that patient care or that data that's being utilized for quality improvement process, there's no HIPAA violation. But I strongly encourage, if you get that, the best thing you can do is, arm yourself with that type of information. Look it up. Make sure that, and once again, non-punitive and collaborative type method. Last thing we want to do is instill any kind of argument or increase friction, but make sure that we're getting that data and building that relationship, and building with the Mission Lifeline programs that are being implemented. Part of that program implementation is a STEMI feedback, and it's just super important that process is, and that feedback process is implemented. Questions, comments so far? I know we've kind of covered a lot of information, but we'd sure like to open up the floor. Either come off mute with *6, type in the chat box. We'd love to take a few minutes and just discuss if people have strategies that they've implemented in terms of data, or some of these last couple of questions that we brought up. Please feel free to share with the group, because obviously, if we have these questions out there, I'm sure people have the same, and they've gone through it, and either they've fixed it or they need help fixing it. So we'll throw it out to the floor and give people a chance to chat.
We did have a question come in via GoToMeeting, Ben. How will the EMS team application data be married with the receiving hospital data?
Okay, so once again, if we do a joint application and marrying that with the hospital data, basically we're going to have to communicate, and the marriage of that data is the pre-hospital data as well as the hospital data. So we're looking at our time, at the EMS times of your treatment times, your arrival times, as Mick pointed out, either your on-scene time or if you have the capabilities to track through your PCR, first medical contact time. That information is brought to the hospital and basically sharing data with your hospital counterpart to determine the first medical contact time. Currently, the way it sits with the hospitals, they will actually mine data off the EMS run sheet to where they can grab that first medical contact time if there. And once again, depending on the capabilities of the PCR, if they track first medical contact or at-patient time versus on-scene time, it's up to that abstractor as to what they're pulling from. But if the biggest thing to do is, as EMS right now, work with your local QSI director. Our local American Heart QSI directors, most of them will have the data abstractors for their hospitals on speed dial. They work with them continually. So, what we can do as AHA is facilitate that first meeting, connect you with them either by phone, would probably be the easiest, but, utilize your resources here that we have on the call and we'll have in the next slide. Now, actually, we'll go on to the next slide. Utilize these folks and get you in contact with the hospital that you're working with to get that information.
Great, thank you, Ben. Any other questions? Anyone want to come off mute, *6, or again, you can use the GoToMeeting question queue.
This is Mick. While we're waiting to see if there's any other questions, I would strongly encourage agencies to use the worksheets, and as you run the calls that meet criteria, make note of who your responding partner is, and then one agency most likely should kind of run point on this, or be the agency that actually submits the data, so that the hospital isn't getting calls from two different agencies, a first responder and an ambulance service about the same case. So if you can link up the data on the field side first and then make the solicitation to the hospital, I think it'll make it easier for everybody. But between the ambulance service and the medical first response agencies in a joint application scenario, you need to designate which one of you is going to track the data and then submit it in the application process.
Excellent.
Just as a reminder, we will be sending out a copy of the slides along with the website to where our recording for this webinar will be posted. That should be out by the end of the week. Anyone else have any other questions or comments? *6 or the GoToMeeting queue? I think that's it. Ben,
okay.
Thank you so much, and Mick, thank you so much also. We really appreciate y'all taking the time to lead this webinar for us. If anyone has any questions, again, feel free to respond to the email when you get your slides, and have a great week, everyone. We look forward to getting lots of EMS recognition applications.
Yes, we do. All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Mick.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.